Today we're talking about two-way radios, how it works with broadcast, why would a broadcast station have two-way radios, and how our system works, how well quality-wise, how well functionally-wise, and why did we install a two-way radio system. All of that coming up here in just a second. Alright, so two-way radios. Why? Why bother with walkie-talkies these days? I mean, come on, this thing does nothing other than you push a button and you talk, and then you have to let go of it in order to listen. I mean, how inconvenient is that? When I can just pick up my cell phone, make a phone call, or send a text message, and it's instantaneous, right? Well, sort of. Cell phones are great. Cell phones are wonderful. In fact, cell phones are two-way radios. They are talking to a cell repeater and receiving from that cell site. So you are getting this information exchange by radio. Well, that's really all this is a lower tech version of this. So why should we even bother with this old school technology these days? Well, I'll tell you why. Because not every place, not everywhere that you go is going to have cell coverage. Cell sites these days are very, very small. Now, I'll take the cell site that's on this building. We have two sites that are on this building, one on that corner and one on that corner. And they are very directional. They have these panel antennas. They look like kind of wide sticks looking things, but they're at really, 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 really low power. How low of power? Well, we're talking milliwatts compared to watts. Quick side discussion here about the standard system of measurements. So remember back in school, we learned the metric system. You have your base unit, and then you have modifiers of that base unit. So you have watts, and if you have 1,000 watts, it's a kilowatt or kilowatts. If you have a thousandth of a watt, it's a milliwatt. Or you have 1,000,000 of it, it's a megawatt. A milliwatt is 1,000th of a watt. So it is a very tiny, tiny, tiny amount of power compared to a watt. So your two-way radios are in watts. Your cell phone is in milliwatts. So there is a very big difference in power. Now, that's why there are so many cell sites all over the place. I mean, there's two on this building, and there's one across the street and one down the street. And so all these little cell sites are little cells, if you will. And they cover a very small little area because the power required for your cell phone is very limited. In order for you to have all-day coverage on your phone or all-day usage, you need to have very little power. We switched that up for two-way radios, and now we're talking in watts. Now there aren't that many two-way radio repeaters in this little area. So we have one here on this building, we have one up on top of the mountain, we have one on another mountain, but we need to have more power in order to be able to reach those sites. Let me go through some of the other reasons why we would need two-way radios rather than just relying on cell phones. We wanted to make sure that we had communications for safety. Myself and some of the other crew that we have currently and had in the past, we would be in some of the canyons traveling to a site or from a site or between sites, and there would be no cell coverage. Some of the canyons that are going on the road going up to Santiago Peak, there's no cell coverage. You might get cell coverage in a couple of spots, but overall, there is no cell coverage. Because again, remember I just said, your cell sites are very low power, which means they cover a very small area. And we can talk about cell sites another time. So we have all these large dead zones where there is no coverage in cell. So that's where the two-way radio comes in, because with the higher power, we're able to see the higher sites on top of a mountain or on top of this building, and we're able to basically bounce RF off of canyon walls in order to be able to hit mountaintops and things like that. We also wanted to have an alternate system to be able to communicate to remote broadcasts that we may have going on. So if we have a remote broadcast going on at, say, the beach, because we're here in Southern California, we always have something going on. So if we're having one at the beach, we have the option to not just use our cell phone, but we could also use the two-way radio. And the last thing is, what if there's a disaster? What if we had an earthquake and all the cell sites are down? What if we had a disaster and everybody at the same time is trying to make a cell phone call? Well, cell phone networks and the telephone networks have never been designed for everybody at the same time to pick up the phone and call. That's never been the case. So when we began this journey of two-way radios, we started looking around at different systems. We thought, okay, do we build our own, or do we rent time from a two-way radio provider? We kind of looked at both and went, well, let's try renting it first. And so we found somebody, another tenant up on Santiago Peak, actually in the building right next door to us. We rented from him a few radios. I think we had 4 radios that we were renting. And we had an issue when we had a very small earthquake here. Cell phone network went down because everybody was making a phone call. And I'm just a couple of miles over there at Costco getting a Costco hot dog. Ooh, great deal, by the way. Getting a Costco hot dog at lunch. And I'm trying to call the studio to see what's going on, to make sure everything's okay, that the station's on the air. And I couldn't get through on my cell phone. Well, I've got my radio. Try to call the studio on the radio, and all they heard was static. Because I had this little guy trying to go all the way up to Santiago Peak, and getting back here to the studio was no problem, but my signal was so weak getting up there that it didn't work. So we decided, you know what, let's build our own system. So around that time, Motorola, now Motorola Solutions, came out with a product called Moto Turbo. And it's basically digital two-way radio. You go to the store, you buy those little blister pack radios, we call them, or those little FRS radios that the kids use all the time, and that's an analog signal. So as you start getting farther apart, it starts getting that scratchy sound to it. Well, digital doesn't have that scratchy sound. Digital works all the way up until it doesn't. So it kind of seems sort of like you have more coverage than you would with an analog system. Built into this Moto Turbo system, the repeaters had something called IP Site Connect. So we could have repeaters on different hilltops, on different sites that we manage or rent or lease or own, and we could put our repeaters there. And what happens is we have a network connection between them. And now, all of a sudden, it is just extended our coverage area. So our system has 3 different sites. We have a site at our studio building, we have a site up on Santiago Peak, and we have a site here outside of Palomar. And between these 3 sites, we can cover basically all of our service area that we would need to be. Mount Woodson, all the way up to Santiago Peak, to the studio, and places in between. We used to have, when we had the station outside of Barstow, we had a site out there which would cover basically our whole drive down the 15. It covered most of the way up to Potosi, but which was, I think it's outside of the spec, how far away that link was. But anyways, that was kind of cool, being on top of Potosi, being able to key up my radio, having it go through the internet to connect back to the studio and talk to someone there. But what happens is when I key up, all the repeaters key up at the same time and repeat my message, simultaneous as to when I'm speaking it. So as I talk, all 3 repeaters are also transmitting that same message. And then vice versa, no matter which repeater I'm on, it's repeating other messages from the studio or from other people to our system. So it's not quite a simulcast system. It's not quite as robust and rugged as, say, like a public safety system, but it's pretty close. And as we're starting to do some of these network things with the studio and making basically it's called hardening our sites and hardening our studio to transmitter links, we're going to start having some redundancies in our IP paths up to the different sites. So we really shouldn't have any real outages with connectivity. That's the plan. That's the hope. We'll see. So let's talk about two-way radio basics for just a moment. So that way we can understand why we have repeaters on tall sites. Now think back, I've said this in the past, many times in the past, that radio is line of sight. If you can see it, you can communicate with it. Not always. I mean, as you start getting into lower frequencies, you have other phenomena, which is really cool, don't get me wrong. But that's outside the scope of what we're talking about right now. So, radio is line of sight. If you can see it, you can communicate with it. So that's why we have sites on top of mountains. From that mountain vantage point, you can see so much coverage area. You can see so much area, and that's all the area that you cover. Hence, it's called coverage area. Now, if you're in the Midwest and you have no mountains, so you have super tall towers that will emulate these mountaintop repeaters. And so, again, the farther that you can see, the farther that you can communicate with it. Now, I did mention that our system is digital. It uses the same encoder as the public safety. I think it's called AMBE2 plus 2, something like that. It takes getting used to. It sounds very different. It's not CD quality. It's by far not CD quality. Our data rates are super, super, super small. So in order to do streaming audio from a device like this over a very, very narrow bandwidth, you have to use a different type of encoding. There are so many things these radios, the system can do. And don't get me wrong, Motorola is just one of different manufacturers. Kenwood has a system, ICOM has a system, Hytera has a system. I don't think they're allowed to sell in the United States right now. Motorola Solutions has a system. So I just am familiar with the Motorola one, and it's probably the more expensive one. But it's who had something at the time when we were looking. Now, there are really cool features with this. I can do private calls. So if I know the ID number or it's in my contact list in here, I can make a private call. And so, I mean, I take up the entire channel, but basically I can have a conversation with one other person and nobody else hears it because it's a private call. I can send text messages. I can do location updates. Each of these radios has GPS in it, so it can update where its GPS location is. The newer models have Bluetooth, so you can use little iBeacons, and you can do indoor locations, which is great for security. So if you have a security guard and they're carrying around this radio, it will know where they're at, and it can do part of their accountability aspects of making sure they did rounds and all that fun stuff. But anyways, I can do telemetry. So I can hook up an accessory on here, and I can push a button, and it'll send a special code to a specific radio, which will close a relay. Or if that specific radio has a relay and it gets closed, it can send a message back and saying, hey, relay 1 closed. I had this kind of working for our station at Palomar, and what would happen is if the transmitter turned on, we had 2 transmitters there, a main and a backup. If the main transmitter turned on, it would close a relay, and it would send a message back to our engineering group, and it would say, transmitter 1 on. And then vice versa for transmitter 2. It would do the same thing. And then we could send telemetry codes to it, and it will turn on or turn off those 2 transmitters. Kind of a slick system. Doesn't exactly work. Working through some networking issues right now to get that working, but it will work eventually again. So there's really cool features. All of the different manufacturers have basically all these different features. And so that is Two-Way Radios. Thanks for watching. This topic was you guys suggesting it, so I appreciate it. Thank you for suggesting this topic, and suggest more down in the comments. I appreciate it. Still trying to get my groove going on explaining, because it does take a good amount of time to basically write my outline of what I'm going to be doing, and to kind of set up my shot list, and anyways, all that stuff, and then to edit it. And anyways, it does take time, but I'm still trying to get my groove going, and so I appreciate your patience, and I appreciate you being here, watching, listening, and being a part of this channel. Anyways, there's a fire out there that just started this afternoon up in Angeles National Forest, so hopefully they'll be able to get that under control quickly. It's hot, it's dry, it's supposed to get warmer and drier this week, so hopefully it doesn't get too exciting around here. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay cool, because it's really warm out here.